I got the best advice from a manager in this situation. I worked in a restaurant where the employees are known for being Ds for about 4 months. And you'll see why I left. We 2 assistant managers plus 1 head manager who was the coolest guy I have ever worked with. One of the AMs was super chill and laid back. He has no role in this story. The other, who is at the center of this story, was a robot. She had a business management degree and did everything by the book, so much so, I'm pretty sure the book bent her over and spanked her every night. One night, we were decently busy, and we had 2 parties coming in about a half hour apart, which would take up 2 our large party tables. There were 2 of the same size, and a third slightly larger. This is important. About a half hour before the first group came in, I'm passing by the office seating other tables and robot asks me, do we have space for 10 right now? This would fill our bigger party table. I respond that there was space, but I was saving it for the big party in an hour. I was taught by our host that had been there for a decade that we should keep party tables open about an hour before the party arrived, so we were ready for them. Yay, but do we have space right now? I'm trying to get more business. Yes. I walk back and prepare for this to be a spit show. This larger party had been reserved for a full week in advance and I knew they wouldn't want to wait, which I totally understand, and honestly don't blame them. The bad manager, who I would have followed anywhere else if it weren't for poor lower management choices like robots, stopped me as I walked back. He was on his way out and wouldn't be there for the evening, but he gave me the best advice I had ever heard in this industry. So, here's the deal. You can panic and get pissed at her, or you can understand you're right and watch this situation explode in her face. Here comes the MC. This newly added party comes in, I seat them at our larger table. Robot looks around, pleased at our full dining room. 30 minutes later, the smaller of the reserved parties comes in. I put them at our smaller party table. I then brace for impact. I seat the larger party immediately when they arrive. The party currently at our larger table is finishing their food and would probably be done in 20 minutes. But as I expected, the new party didn't want to wait. I seat them at the table I knew would be too small, and walk away. 5 minutes later, I get a pissed off robot on my radio. Did you seat this party just now at the smaller table? Yay, they didn't want to wait. Well, you need to come explain to them that they need to. This table is too small. I'm seating other people, give me a second. I come by when seating other guests and watch robot with her best customer service voice that made her sound somewhat human explaining that they were particularly busy tonight. Guest wasn't having it. We booked a week in advance. You should have been ready for us. Yes, robot. Yes, you should have. You'd like me to resign? How about I fire myself from this job instead? Part 1, New Job. This happened about a year ago now, but I still think back to it from time to time and appreciate how well it unfolded. I work in software and took a job at a small medium-sized software company in 2018. The company was family-owned and I went high school with the CEO's daughter. The place itself was rampant with nepotism and the company culture wasn't great. Sexist comments and humorous racist remarks were common, but I needed a job and this was one of the few options I had. My title was project coordinator, but I was quickly relegated to buying lunches for the team and such. At one point when the lottery reached 500 million, the CTO asked me to dress like Randy Savage and get a pool together. I spent a whole day buying lottery tickets. I hated it, but kept thinking if I paid my dues, I'd get a shot at some real work and growth. Eventually I got a chance to handle recruiting and doing intro calls for new hires. It was brutal, but yet again I kept pushing through. Part 2, I hate it here. It was a 6-month contract to hire situation and they made me an offer which I was able to negotiate from $40K to $55K, which felt like validation finally. Sadly, nothing changed after this. I kept buying lunches and setting up calls that I wouldn't be included in. Around this time, one-to-ones essentially ended for me. What was a monthly cadence with my boss, the CTO, turned to once every 3 months, and finally he had me reporting the CEO's daughter who would then conduct my one-to-ones. I was open about my frustrations, and I was promised that in January 2020, they would move me out of hiring. January came and went. Part 3, MaliciousCompliance. February and I finally had a meeting with the CTO. I got to his office only to be told that there was no other role for me, and now that we had hired more people, we didn't have a need for my services anymore on the tech team. I pushed harder, and essentially the CEO's daughter didn't have faith in me and that was that. He politely suggested I resign, and they'd give me a letter of recommendation. We went back and forth and he finally mentioned that there was another opening on another team, but he thought that would be a bad role for me. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. He showed all his hands at that point and I knew I could make this work for me. The next day I updated my DICE profile and within 24 hours had 2 interviews set up. I then told him I needed a few days to think things over and that I was taking PTO. I went home and waited, watched Nacho Libre and prepped for interviews. That day, he texted me asking me general work questions. Day 2, he finally broke down and asked, over text, if I wanted to be let go or resign. He actually wrote that in text form. I told him I was still thinking about the other role and hadn't made a decision. I then had dinner with the founder of the company. The other role was on his team. He was the CEO's husband and he and I always got along. I laid out everything I went through. That night I emptied most of my office, and the next day the CTO called livid, telling me I was handling this the wrong way and this was making it difficult for them. 2 days later, after using some of my PTO, I walked into the VP of HR's office and told her to fire me. She looked at me confused, and said that a manager normally needs to tell her that. I showed her printed out screenshots of our texts and a log of my one-to-ones. Citing that if they were firing me for cause, then you'd think this would look more consistent. Fallout. I was fired, and at this point, I had a job lined up already. Shutdown hit and that offer was delayed, but because I was fired, I could claim unemployment. This hit them and they even tried to claim they gave me severance, but I had all my pay stubs and proved otherwise. The CEO's daughter straight up stopped talking to me, and they ended up giving up their office and moving into a co-working space. I got a job as a legit PM at a Fortune 50 software company. I bought a Lincoln. My life is 100 times better. My parents voted for the first time this year, and I went with them. They live close to that co-working space, and with as much salt as possible, I linked up with a few folks I actually liked at the company, and they told me to come over. I spent a half day working in the same space as them, with the biggest grin on my face. And that's how I left my previous company. As a kid, they tell you don't get fired. As an adult, sometimes it's the smartest option. My dad served my detention. When I was a freshman in high school, I went to a school that was 30+ minutes drive away. They had a policy that 3 tardies, with a good excuse or not, across a semester, would automatically assign an after-school detention. I was a really good kid. Never got in trouble, ever. Always really nice and friendly to everybody, worked really hard at everything I did from sports to studies, even if I wasn't the best at either I tried super hard, and all my teachers knew that and all had good rapport with me. My parents declined to sign the detention notice, and explained to administration how I had zero control over when they left, and especially no control of road or traffic conditions, even after us leaving extra early to have a time cushion. I was only late by a couple minutes on the rare time I was even late, but administration declined to remove the detention assignment. I asked my parents to just let it go and let me serve the stupid detention just to be done with it, or just decline and leave it at that. But they had other plans. The next day, my little professor, wild-looking social worker counselor dad with the big glasses, briefcase, worn-down notepad, and his prized 20-year-old Mont Blanc pen, signed himself into the school to serve detention the next afternoon, much to the embarrassment and discomfort of the administrators. They had a hard time holding eye contact with him, and were visibly uncomfortable. They found an empty room to put him, and checked in on him once or twice, even offered to let him leave early, but he declined so he would serve the full amount of detention they assigned, and wrote sentences for an hour until detention was over. To my recollection, after that, there seemed to be a differentiation between excused and unexcused tardies. I don't know if for the whole school, but for us anyway, it was never an issue for me after that. But like I said, it was rare anyway to even be a couple minutes late. At the time, I was so embarrassed, but looking back now, it's kind of funny, and I appreciate the point he was making in not letting me get punished for something I didn't do wrong and had no control over.